We are Southeastern 16. We continue game predictions as we predict Kentucky versus Georgia coming up this Saturday night. It will be a 6:30 game on ABC is where you can watch it as Georgia comes into this game right now as we sit here on Monday as a 24-point favorite with the line being 45.5 points. And so this game, I feel like, had more meaning before this past week, but we will break it down for you right after we talk about Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? You can get in on a $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, you can go to the online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker or one of the over 150 slots games. Head over to the website today to get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. So, Chris, Kentucky, tough go on Saturday as they fall 31-6 to South Carolina. Georgia, big win, 48-3 over FCS opponent Tennessee Tech. But let's start with Kentucky offensively. As former Georgia backup Brock Vandagriff, now the starting quarterback at Kentucky, he had a rough day against the Gamecocks. He was 3 of 10 passing, 30 yards, and an interception. He had 9 carries for negative 29 yards rushing. Again, he's going to be facing a really good defense in Georgia. The offensive line was a struggle with Kentucky as well. Just based off this past Saturday, I feel like this is somewhat of a mismatch, but we know the kind of the capabilities of what Kentucky could be. I feel like as we've looked a lot about Kentucky all through the summer, you base it off one game and it looks like a mismatch, but there is some talent on this Kentucky offense. We know there is.
Yeah, Kentucky was the team that I thought was being the most underrated in the league. Now, I didn't know about their ability to break into that playoff tier, which we perceived as 9 teams before the season. It's certainly not 9 teams now. But yeah, you've got to have an offense in this day and age, and struggle is an understatement to what happened Saturday. I mean, more your starting quarterback was sacked more times than he had pass completions. That's never where you want to be. And look, that wasn't all Brock Vandagriff's fault. It just a completely disjointed performance by Kentucky. I mean, 11 penalties for 63 yards. I think they really miss Ray Davis. You know, that made up for a lot of things the last few years. They got a lot of talent receiver, but if you can't get a pass off, and by the way, having struggles in pass protection, there is no team in the country you would less rather face in that scenario than Georgia, which their quarterback pressure numbers every year are just absurd. The sacks may not always lead the country, but they're always getting after you. It just becomes really hard to see a path for success for Kentucky on that side of the matchup.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line is going to have to look worlds different from what we saw against South Carolina because as we turn to talk now about the Georgia defense, this is just a great defense. We saw what they were able to do against a good Clemson team in week 1 to really limit them offensively. I think we could be looking at one of the best defenses that we've seen from Kirby Smart this year, and that is not what Kentucky fans want to hear because, again, they're going to pressure Brock Vandagriff very hard in this game.
Yeah, and you do wonder about I don't know if there's a hard feelings or revenge factor, but it's going to be weird. That's the other part of the dynamic is you're going against the guy that took reps in practice numerous times, was the backup, I guess, last year. I mean, that is another strange dynamic of the matchup. Is there any bad blood there? You know, the last thing Georgia needs is a little motivation, but I do wonder how that dynamic plays out. I have no idea.
Yeah, that is interesting. Former teammate there in Brock Vandagriff, but the defense as a whole has been impressive. I feel like not much can get past the secondary for Georgia. I've been really impressed with them. And I know, again, you can't take much from this Tennessee Tech game, but you can take a lot, I feel like, from the Clemson opener.
Yeah, and I think if you're Kentucky, you're going to have to find creative ways to get the ball to Maclin and Key and Brown. I mean, end arounds may be a may be an option if or just something to get that passing game going. Of course, that's easy to say, hard to do against Georgia, a team that sideline to sideline is, year in and year out, maybe the fastest defense that you see in college football.
Yep. And flip it over to Georgia offensively. Again, Carson Beck, tremendous day against Tennessee Tech, 18 of 25, 242 yards, 5 touchdowns. And against the Golden Eagles of Tennessee Tech, Trevor Etienne back and looked great. I think, having him back on the sidelines, back in the game, I think will be huge in a game like this because he's hard to stop for anyone, for any defense. But I feel like they're going to utilize him a lot in this matchup against Kentucky.
Yeah, I think that was the only thing I could really take away was Etienne was back out of the doghouse and on the field. Had 5 carries for 70-something yards. I mean, Georgia kind of takes those FCS games with a grain of salt. Georgia probably could have scored 90 points in that game if it had wanted to. Instead, settled for a 48-3 win in which it gave up a field goal, I think, on the last play of the game.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, Georgia's offense so far, it's kind of what we've seen. It's a lot of guys involved. It's an experienced quarterback. It's an offensive line that's probably second to none. Now, if you want a sleeper aspect to the game, and I'll throw out last year's 51-13 game in Athens just for the sake of convenience. But you go back 2022, Georgia won this one 16-6. 2021, Georgia won it 30-13. 2020, 14-3. 2019, 21-0. Now, look, those Georgia offenses on average scored a lot more points than what they did against Kentucky. We know Mark Stoops is a defensive-oriented coach. I don't know what he's figured out in a secret sauce to maybe hold Georgia down below its averages those years. And look, maybe Kirby Smart figured out whatever it was that they had on them last year. I don't know. But if you're looking for a path to this game to be interesting, I think it starts there. We have talked how much we like their defense on all 3 levels. They've got a ton of experience up front. They got Max Harrison in the secondary, who's a corner that could probably start for maybe any team in the league. And so if you're looking for a path to this being a lot closer than we would think based on watching these 2 teams this year, that is it. And history has borne it out for the last 5 years.
Yeah, that is an excellent point there in this matchup. And really what is I guess surprising to me about this Kentucky team, all the veterans on defense, and yet South Carolina was able to move the ball on them like they were. But going in, looking up and down the roster, this is a talented defensive roster for Kentucky, and I still think they have a lot of potential this season once they get some things figured out.
Well, move the ball is, I would say, maybe a little generous. They had 252 yards last week. That's not a lot. I mean, when your offense is so bad, it affects the other side of the ball. So I still think now Carolina did average 10.4 yards a pass on just 16 attempts. Of course, Carolina didn't have to throw it that much because it got a lead early and just was able to build on it. But yeah, I mean, it's the bottom line is when your offensive line is so bad against Georgia, I just think that shades the whole matchup. And that's my concern for Kentucky, even have a chance in this one is like, if you had a week off, maybe you feel a little bit better, but I just think there's so much to get right. And oh, by the way, Kentucky wasn't disciplined at all last week, 11 penalties. They're just not things you want to see with Georgia next up on the docket.
Yep, you are correct about that. When it comes to predictions, Chris, I believe I'll take the Georgia Bulldogs getting it done this week to start SEC play.
Yeah, I feel like Kentucky is due to play better. I feel like Mark Stoops is a good coach. He's not Kirby Smart, but he's a good coach. And it feels like a little bit of a bounce back spot for Kentucky, not to win, but it's Georgia. And you kind of throw out all the bounce back scenarios because you got to go against that defense. If this game is close going into the 4th quarter, I'll be surprised. I think I'll take Georgia big here.
Yep, I agree with that. We'll have you covered on that game and every other game. We'll be reacting to them. We'll be previewing games this week leading up to another week. Our power rankings are up for this week as well. So just subscribe to the Southeastern 16 YouTube channel. You can share it with your friends, like this video, drop us a comment as well if you would be interested in sponsoring our content. We would love to talk with you about that. Caroline.smith@southeastern14.com is who you can contact to talk about that. And we will have you covered with all things SEC football, basketball, and baseball here on Southeastern 16. And it's brought to you by BetOnline.